Sherpa does not mean to carry something. It's an ethnic group, it's not a job. I wanted to know about the Sherpa and reveal a part of their soul and their life and their vision that we don't normally see in those adventure magazines. I've got to comment on this one really quick. This is Danuru Sherpa. He became a really close friend of mine and was my guide in the mountains. And he's checking Facebook on his iPhone. I'm not kidding. It's not like my opening joke. It's what he's actually doing. You can get really, really good full bar service at Camp 1 on Ama Dablam at 21,000 feet. So I'm the lucky guy that got to photograph this story. I actually didn't really care about all this Everest drama and all these big adventure stories that overtake every adventure magazine every single May. I wanted to know about the Sherpa, and I hope I'm going to be able to show you some images tonight that'll reveal a part of their soul and their life and their vision that we don't normally see in those adventure magazines. You know, it all starts simply enough. This is the trek to Everest Base Camp, but I knew eventually that I would end up getting into this. And I knew eventually we'd get into this, right? And this is really not my territory. This was my warm-up hike. This is at around 20,000 feet. It's really important to reinforce this fact. Sherpa does not mean to carry something. You know, we got all kinds of packs, stuff called the Sherpa, baby carriers called the Sherpa. It's an ethnic group, it's not a job. These guys are not Sherpas, they're porters, and they're of a different ethnic group. They're of the Rai ethnic group from lower in Nepal. The Sherpas' work begins here. It begins at base camp. You can see porters unloading these massive packs down here in the bottom of the frame, and it's from this point on that the Sherpas' job begins. They carry the loads up through the really difficult terrain, the terrain that requires the crampons and the ice axe as they go through the Khumbu ice fall 20, 30 times in a season. A lot of these loads are upwards of 150 pounds. If you shove that whole backpack full of oxygen canisters, it's incredible weights, more than the body weight quite often. The work the Sherpa are famous for is this high altitude work. This is Ama Dablam, Camp 2. This is one of the most dramatic camps in the world that you can only fit 5 or 6 tents. They're all at a little bit of an angle. It's the last place you can sleep before you get into the slopes that can really avalanche off on that mountain. And I wanted to put in one personal point of view photograph to show you what I see, what I have to do to make these photographs. I'm not a mountaineer, so this was a new environment for me. This is one of those tents right there. I'm kind of walking past one that's right below them to cross this little bridge there. Back at base camp, the Sherpas gather with their expedition team to discuss their roles on the mountains. Who's going to set up Camp 1, who's going to take down Camp 2, who's going to carry the kitchen gear, who's going to carry all the Western climbers' stuff. And in the case of this meeting, they're actually discussing who is going to take down the dead body of a Bangladeshi climber that was left on the summit. The family had paid this company to try to go back and retrieve it. One of their main jobs, besides carrying these heavy loads above base camp, is also essentially the herding of the human cattle. You know, we've got these big lines of people going up these ropes, and on a lot of these Himalayan peaks, they go almost all the way from the base to the summit on many of the Himalayan climbs. And these are rope systems that a client can clip into with an ascender and just keep putting one foot after another all the way to the top of a mountain. And quite often, people will go up incredibly difficult looking faces and dangerous faces with the help of the Sherpas just because of these ropes. You can see in this image a Western climber. I think it's like a French-German group. He didn't know how to use his ascender, and he's being taught 100 meters below the summit. His Sherpa helper actually had to take away the ascender and show how to unclip it and reclip it on, and then actually made a couple of pulls for him so he could get up a couple of feet. And then, you know, if this is on Everest, you start having that bottleneck and hundreds of people pile up. You know, climbers like that will often choose this particular mountain as their first peak, and will actually have to climb below that hanging glacier over there to the right. And once the camps get established at these higher altitudes, the guides, these amazing athletes, they kind of snap into a new role that's really like kitchen helpers. They're boiling water and cooking food and taking care of everybody. And it was amazing for me to watch these athletes doing this kind of work It was like watching the NBA All-Star team like waiting hand and foot on wealthy clients. It's like having Michael Jordan or LeBron James like serving you like cereal in bed while you're still in your sleeping bag. Because these guys, they really are some of the best athletes in the world, and they're spooning this dude's sugar and asking whether he wants butter on his toast. And this happens because they pay the money for that. On Everest, we're talking $40,000 to $120,000. For me, this story was about this guy. It was not about the famous Sherpa. It's not about the guy that has all the big sponsors. It's not about the world record holder. It's about kind of the blue-collar worker of the Sherpa world, the guy that just does the work to pay for his family. This guy's maybe climbed Everest 2, 3, 4 times. He wants to pay to get his kids through school, and he's going to go risk his life to do that. Death rates for Sherpas working in the mountains on these expeditions statistically is higher than the death rates of US soldiers in the Iraq War. So, pretty dangerous job. But at the end of the day, this is just about the money. A lot of these guys really don't want to do this job. They do it because there is a river of money running by their villages, and the only way to get it is to jump in and follow it all the way to Everest. This was a surprising scene I also saw on payday. It was a little gambling, and what was surprising was that some of these guys were playing with $100 bills, which would be like playing with $2,000 bills here. It was a lot of money to be messing around with, but I guess they were celebrating the fact they had survived. At the end of the Everest season, though, I followed down my Sherpa guides and friends because I wanted to go into the villages to see what their daily life and culture looked like. This is Namche Bazaar. It's really the hub and the heart. It's where everybody kind of comes in. It's the center of trading. It's the last place to buy all of your gear. Some people might even helicopter into this place. It's a tourist town full of hotels, restaurants. It's probably tripled in size over the last 10 years. 20 years ago, there were none of these tin roofs. It's really big money is running through this village because so many people are on this trail and coming into the mountains. But I also got off the beaten track a little bit. This is the village of Fortse. It's not on the main path. And this town stands out because it has the record for the most Everest summiters. Not the most summits, I believe that's Tame, but Fortse has 60 people that have summited Everest. And that's nearly every home in this village has somebody who either actively works right now or has worked on the mountain. You know, these are really quiet villages. This is the village of Tame, where people grow potatoes, herd yaks. There aren't a lot of other options for making an income besides the mountain. Running a tea house, running a lodge, those are kind of the dreams. A lot of people save up their money to start up a tea house so that they won't have to keep working in the mountains. Life is really quiet and slow in these places, with the exception of the heated volleyball matches that happen almost every day. They were awesome to watch. They were super serious about volleyball. This is Sherpas versus porters. I saw several of these matches that were Sherpa on Sherpa, where every single member of both sides had summited Everest. Those were cool to see. You know, whole games of Everest summiters from the age of 16 to some of the guys in their 50s still doing it. This is like the new face of Everest climbing. That guy on the left, I think, was the youngest guy in the last handful of years. He had just turned 16. Now we're going 3 generations back. This guy climbed, this is Karma Tenzing. He's 77, 78 years old. He worked with Sir Edmund Hillary on expeditions in the 50s, and then in the 60s and 70s, he helped Hillary put together roads, bridges, schools, a lot of the work projects that he did when he returned. And Hillary, who you can see in this picture here, he was really a model for the Western Sherpa interaction, for a kind of ideal form of that. He returned and gave back to the community, and he's still honored for his charitable contributions. This is at the anniversary of the school he started in Tame. After the climbing season, I wanted to return with some of the climbers I had met to their homes. I followed Kalden Fura Sherpa back to his home the day he came back from Everest to see him reunite with his children at the tea house he runs with his wife. You know, this is a time for young fathers to reunite with the children that they've left for 3 months. But there are always the cases where the father, the husband, the brother does not come back. And that's a really hard part of this story to cover. This is Nima Doma Sherpa. She lost her husband, Darita. He died of heart failure at Camp 3 on Everest in 2012. And he leaves behind at the time a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old in considerable debt. And this is a bunch of self-portraits from last year's Khumbu Climbing School at the Khumbu Climbing Center that Conrad and his wife set up. I really wanted people to be able to take pictures of themselves instead of having it always be me and my idea of what they looked like. One of the great benefits of all of this Western influence and help is in new education programs like this, like the Khumbu Climbing School. They teach basic safety skills. A lot of these young guys, I'm talking about 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds going up to Everest, they're jumping in the river of money, and a lot of these guys, they might be able to keep up, and they might have the lung capacity, they might be strong, but some of these guys actually don't know how to tie knots, and they don't know how to set up anchors. So people leave this school really competent and safe. They practice rescues and wilderness first aid. All of this ultimately saves lives on the mountain. A lot of the children from these climbers, a lot of these families, they don't want their kids working on the mountain. And they end up saving all their money to send them to Kathmandu, and they're gonna attend boarding schools like this one, Mount Kailash boarding school in Kathmandu, where almost every student here is part of a Sherpa climbing family. And they live a lot of times away from family or with relatives in the city in hopes that that education will bring them a different job than climbing. This is Tashi Jangbu, he's 16 years old. He lives away from his family. His father has summited Everest 13 times and is saving money so that his kid can go to school and so that the family can build a lodge or a tea house and kind of move away from this mountaineering industry. While I was in Kathmandu, I got to see a really different side of the Sherpa world. Got to go to some dance parties with some of my new friends. Their lives are really different than this kind of romantic village life. These guys are living just like my friends. They live a big urban life. They go out. Some of these guys really love climbing. They travel all over the world. They're professionals. They're part of European mountain guiding associations. So you do have both sides there. One of the things I really wanted to do was to find a way to bring back how the Sherpas see themselves. This is Danuru and his mother, Daki. Daki had 8 sons that all worked in the mountains. 5 are still alive. Danuru is the youngest and lives with her and helps take care of her. But you see this photo wall behind them, behind Danuru with his summit picture and his family. I found a way through these picture walls, I think, to share how they see themselves, how they see their own families that they provide for with this work that they do. Why do they do this risky work? To pay for this, to pay for their family, for their future. I wanted to also show what do they do when the world isn't watching, when our photographers aren't hovering over their shoulders trying to get National Geographic pictures? When they go climbing alone with their wife, right? These are photos I could never get. I love these found photos from their own collections. What photos they carry to the top of the mountain with them? What do they carry up there? And what photos do they return home with, right? To hang on their own walls. I love this one. He brought his kid's stuffed gorilla up there. So I collected these summit photos. I collected hundreds of these. These are the images of the Sherpa like we're not used to seeing them. It's usually the Westerner we see in the victory pose. And I think there's a lot to learn from how the Sherpas see themselves. And to me, it's a reminder, in this world full of stories about Western climbers and victories and dramas, that it's not all about us.